That's what's tough about being the hero is you see something you want to have happen, but it's not what they want to have happen. You know, I mean, I spend my life having people tell me that they're stuck in life and going through trauma and all this stuff. And I don't explain to them how to get out of the hole because, you know, when you're in a hole, all you have to do is look to your right and notice there's a fucking ladder there.
This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
And it wasn't until I gained the clarity, or as I say, made sense. That's where the whole concept of my work came from, that I became free. And there's two things that happen when you're, and I know you're very much like this. There's two things that happen when you go through something like that. One of them was that, because in an instant, I was perfect. I was back. I wanted to go to work, and I was like, boom. I was clear of it. I knew I probably needed to go see more therapists, but no, fuck it, I'm done. I'm back out on the field. And I made a decision that day that I'm never going to go feel like that again.
Well, so that's the funny thing. So once you experience an emotion,
Right.
Once you experience it, and it sucks, like with his death. So I was where he was. You were where he was.
Right.
So you know what that feels like. But when Mike took his life, my peripheral vision, which was here during that time, and on a normal day, it would be like here, widened up so much because I saw the carnage of my potentially selfish decision. Like you taking your life. It was ultimately a selfish decision.
Oh, I wasn't even thinking about that.
No, you're not.
Yeah.
And because there's ripple effects to that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You know, think about what you would have done to your mother and your father, who I'm sure love you.
Not a thought.
Not a thought in your, because it's like there's total darkness. You know, you see this with people who take their lives and they leave children behind. I mean, you're a father. Is there anything more pure that you love in the world than your children?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I have a reason to never kill myself now, but I made a decision that day that I would never go back to feeling that way. But I also made a decision and a commitment that day to spend the rest of my life helping people that don't know that that's possible. So all of my work that day became entrenched in human behavior and how to help people that can't be helped. Because you know what it's like when you feel like there's nothing anybody can do to help me. I am going to die. And that's it. And it's a good thing because it's going to end my suffering, right? That kind of person, if that person can learn how to put a pause on that and step into what I call a conscious space where they can look at things from different vantage points. That's the hardest part about it.
Well, that's how the whole Not Today movement got.
Exactly.
That's how I started.
And that's what I wrote on my cup. I wrote,
So the Not Today movement was born out of this, where
Right.
you don't think about tomorrow. Don't think about 3 weeks from now.
Just not today.
Just not today. That's all you got to do. And that's that moment for you. It's like,
That's it.
I'm just not doing this today.
It's cognitive distancing.
So have you ever woken up in the middle of the night or early in the morning and you have all these things running through your head, and being a creative, I'm gonna foretell the future a little bit. You get an idea like at 3 o'clock in the morning,
Sure.
and you can't. I keep a notepad by my bed, but that's how I just get it out. But you know how many times I got to sit there and go, no, don't let this happen. Not today. Don't let this happen today.
You mean a negative idea?
Both negative, mostly negative. I'll do this with a negative. It's like, no, man, don't let this happen right now. This is not happening today. We're not going down this road. And I've had to consciously say that to myself several times. And then once I'm able to decompress myself, but by example, and this is what I love about you, is because by example, you can say, I was in that place. I was there. I know exactly where you were. So I'm going to show you what I did. It may not work for you, but if this doesn't work for you, I'll show you different ways, to other different things that I have resources now because I'm so engrossed in this lifestyle. So I love that because you were there and you're going to try your best to make sure other people aren't there. Are they going to be there? Are you going to be successful all the time? You're not.
No.
You're not. And if you know that going in there, then it doesn't take up too much space in your head.
So, because I remember you and I were talking about this, because I think I asked you one of the questions, like if somebody's listening to this podcast and, what would you recommend that they do? And they were in that jam up. we have to also recognize that somebody has to become open and to receiving help, because I remember what it was like to not being interested in help. So, when my mom said, let's go see the therapist, I had to say yes, right? So I have to embrace that. But what I can do through my podcast and through my books and through the channels that I provide, like you do, where people can be listening and learning in private, maybe I can say something that has that part of the brain that goes, that's different. And if the human brain just captures a glimpse of a moment where it can see it from a different vantage point, because our vantage point and our perception is completely programmed, since childbirth. I remember your story. The way I look at the world is not my choice. I was programmed with what's called a perspective in life, and that creates my perception. So that's why I wear glasses without lenses, because I used to go through life looking at life through the lenses that were provided to me.
God,
right?
I can't wait for you to hear the opening of this. So I record the openings prior to you coming in, and I talk about the blurred lens of reality.
I'm leaving these with you.
Oh, okay.
So that's what I always do when I go visit someone. You're going to get these glasses.
And they will have a special place here because I want everybody to look through clear lenses just like you do.
Well, just think about the idea of wearing glasses. Somebody else made the lenses and it skews your vision. So when I got these glasses, I took the lens out. And what's funny is I can see better with them. But that's the concept is human beings have this ability. Every one of us. Sometimes they don't get to it. They have this ability to gain a glimpse of clarity through a different vantage point. And that's why I wrote on my cup, just like you say, not today. I teach people when they have a thought, 40 to 70,000 thoughts run through our brain a day. And for whatever reason, we like to latch on to like 2 or 3 and call that reality.
And 80% of them are negative.
In this world, sure.
The key component to any law enforcement officer being the best version of themselves is through education. Sherry Alsop is a leader in providing that education to police agencies, preparing them for the all too frequent dealings with sexual assault victims.
You've seen Sherry on episode 169 of the Suffering Podcast. She survived incest and almost daily sexual assault, so she comes from a place of experience and true understanding.
Sherry has the intelligence, commitment, and compassion to open the eyes of those on the front lines, while providing the tools to effectively deal with a difficult situation. Sherry's instruction comes from experience and multiple certifications.
Training with Sherry will offer on-site training, customized schedules, specialized instruction tailored from a victim's perspective.
You are going to hear Sherry's heart-wrenching but inspiring survivor story. Learn proprietary trauma-informed training techniques, uncovered victim-centered interview methods while earning continuing education credits according to your state guidelines. To be the best, you must learn from the best. Let Sherry also guide you through the delicate cases of sexual assault from a victim's point of view.
Be a source of comfort to those victims affected by these traumatic experiences while producing a solid investigation and uncovering details that often go unnoticed.
To find out more or to contact Sherry Alsop, go to sherryalsop.com. That's SherryAllsup.com.
I just teach people when either it's your thought or somebody says something to you or an event, is distance yourself, give yourself a little bit of space and just go,
You know the funny part about that 80%, that's a real statistic.
Yeah.
So 80% of our thoughts are negative. A child, 30 to 40% are negative. And then what happens? Just like you start to become ingrained and embedded
Sure.
and imprinted with the negativity here and there, and you suppress it. And see, for me, like my stuff started coming out in my early 40s. All right, you're fortunate that you're a little bit ahead of the curve with the early 30s.
yeah.
And when they started coming out, it's just like I didn't want to feel those things because they were not comfortable.
And you
at
had
all.
a kid. You already had a kid.
Yeah, they weren't comfortable feelings, and I didn't know how to get through them. So when you're speaking to people, have you ever become so frustrated? Because your goal is to try to help them in whatever form, fashion that person needs it. Did you ever become so frustrated because you couldn't?
I mean, one of the unconscious behaviors of a human is to be the hero.
Mm-hmm.
right?
It's an archetype.
We love the idea of swooping in and saving the cat from the tree, but sometimes the cat doesn't want to come out of the tree. So I think it's just, I know what you're saying. It can be frustrating when you look at somebody and say, if they just did this, then everything would be great.
Just like, "Ugh."
Especially if it's something as serious as losing your friend. You always go back and say, I wish that he would have called me, but he didn't. He knew he could have called you.
Yep.
So I've changed the way that I look at things, which has made it so the things that I look at have changed. So I don't get frustrated with people anymore because I understand. It makes sense why they're like that.
So with him, we were getting, me and my other group of friends, we were getting so frustrated with him, and we're men, and we deal with frustration like men do, which is usually to act out in anger. We actually had plans to go over there and maybe get a little physical with him and say, hey, you're going.
Yeah,
you're going.
sure.
But that was the level of frustration. Because the one person who was always sitting next to me, I couldn't, we're sitting across from all these people, gaining all this different perspective, and his ears were shut off.
Yeah. You wanted something different than he did, though. So, that's what's tough about being the hero is you see something you want to have happen, but it's not what they want to have happen. I spent my life having people tell me that they're stuck in life and going through trauma and all this stuff. And I don't explain to them how to get out of the hole, because when you're in a hole, all you have to do is look to your right and notice there's a fucking ladder there. But if you don't look to your right, you'll never notice that the ladder's there. So what I find that my place is in the very beginning is I have to give them the space to make the conscious decision that they want to change. The only way you can shift is by catching your drift first. You have to first understand, like I somehow did, that I had gotten off path. And from that space, I could say something like, I don't want to be like this anymore. That would be a prompt for me to go in a different direction. So when I speak to people and I'm asking them questions, and I don't see them initiating anything in the form of action in a direction, I just know it's not time yet. So I'm just there with them. And I just like to give them the opportunity to know that if they change their mind, here's what to do. But you can't stop a locomotive,
But what you did for yourself, going back to your own epiphany, you actually looked yourself in the mirror and told yourself a very hard truth, which is, I always say, the one person you should be truthful with, because we all look for truth from other people. Like, how many times have you heard, well, what do you want me to tell you? How about you tell me the truth? So we expect truth from everybody else. I was speaking about this on Instagram Live. We expect truth from everybody else, but the person we fail to give the truth to more times than not is ourselves.
Sure.
Why am I failing at life? Well, because you're acting inappropriately, because you're doing all these bad things, you're making bad decisions, you're drinking too much, you're doing all these bad things.
Making excuses.
That's the truth. Not until you can look at yourself in the mirror, and that person in the mirror knows your weaknesses, knows your strengths, knows your insecurities, knows your fears. They know everything about you. They have the tactical advantage over you. And that's the one person you cannot lie to. If you don't feel like getting up, well, maybe you're lazy. If you're not in shape, not in the shape that you want to be, well, maybe it's time to start eating better things, going to the gym, working out, doing all that stuff. That's the truth. But people want the easy way out. They want you to give them the secret sauce. And there is no secret sauce. The secret sauce is work harder.
Yeah, there's another place for the... it's like when somebody is telling me, when somebody's talking to me and alluding to the fact, like, well, what should I do? How do I do it? What I do is I just go, huh. Because if I give them the space to hear what they just said, they always figure out it's bullshit. So what I used to do is I would be like, hey, you're full of shit. You can't do that. You got to do this. And then all of a sudden, unconsciously, I just took over the direction of their life without them making the decision. And I gave them what they wanted. I started directing them. But what I do is I just allow people to think about what they said. So if somebody says something to me and my brain goes, this is nonsense. This person is just bullshitting. They're making up excuses and all that stuff. They need to look in the mirror, all that stuff. They need to see that. So I give them the opportunity. So I'll say like, huh. And they'll go, people don't like that because they want an answer. They'll say, well, what does that mean? And I go, well, I was just thinking about what you said. And by saying that, They think about it too. And you know what happens if you shut your mouth as the hero? They go, yeah, it's pretty stupid what I just said, isn't it? And I go,
It's hard to say that as podcasters, to say the best thing you can do sometimes is to shut your mouth.
yeah.
So, do you know Charlie Cifarelli?
Well, if somebody comes on your podcast, they're asking for help.
True. True. Do you know Charlie Cifarelli from Clubhouse? You've seen him on
I think
Clubhouse.
I know the name, yeah.
All right. So Charlie told me years ago that he does not give people advice. He gives them suggestions. Okay. And I took that ball and ran with it, because if you give somebody advice, you own it. Just like you said, you took control. You took control of the course of their life. So with a suggestion, it's like, I suggest you do this. Now all of a sudden it because if they're wrong, if your advice you give them is wrong, guess what? You own it. You own it. And that's a bad place to sit in, because if you're dead wrong, you're 100% wrong, well, JC told me to do it, so I guess I got to do it. And that's not it's not a fun place, and you shouldn't do that with anybody. In my opinion, my suggestion is don't do that stuff. But so let's backtrack for a second.
Yeah.
So you have this epiphany, you're able to do some work.
Right.
You're able to start providing. Did you ever marry the girl?
Oh, yeah.
You married the girl, so she was willing to wait for you, and
Oh, man, yeah, all that stuff. You know, like you, I remember you telling me, like, I don't know how your wife put up with all that stuff you did. So
she's the hero of the
and
story.
Ironically, I ended up getting divorced from that woman who's my best friend for life, and we've got 2 great boys together.
That's weird.
Oh, listen, I could have a podcast on how to have a successful divorce. I mean,
That's your book. There's your next book. You'll
yeah,
be number
got
one
a
bestseller.
lot of books in this head. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how these angels are right in front of you sometimes, and you just don't know.
But there was a slow progression to where you are now, helping people,
right.
reaching out. To you had to work. You had a family.
Yeah, I
you
went
had all
back
this-
to work. Yep.
You went back to work, and then the workaholic JC comes in.
Right. That's what's interesting about that is, you know, it's a double-edged sword when you become free and you make this decision. Part of me was running away from this darkness I never wanted to see again. And the way I mended that was I decided to help people for the rest of my life, which means I didn't help myself. So, you know, they're all necessary parts of getting to where I'm at right now. But what ended up happening is I went and became a workaholic. I became a humanitarian. I was humanitarian of the year. I found out that there was earthquakes in Haiti. I went there to save everybody. You know, I just started doing all of this stuff, and I completely forgot about my kids. I mean, I love my kids. I used to tell my kids in the morning, you know, you're the greatest thing in the world. Daddy loves you more than ever. And then I would come home after they were asleep, you know. So
You became your father.
well, that's the worst thing in the world, right? Is that. But at the same time, I had to learn those lessons. You know, if you ask my kids and my wife and my new daughter, you know, what it's like to have me as a dad now, I'm the greatest dad in the world. And there's only one reason I'm like this, is because of all this suffering. So, you know, my relationship with suffering, and my next book is called The Suck. I love it. I love it. If I wake up and there's nothing wrong, I find something wrong, because I love to bask in the area where growth takes place.
Well, that's the C.S. Lewis quote. And, you know, everybody quotes C.S. Lewis. So it's, if suffering is such a good thing, ought it not to be sought out? Yeah. Because there's no pressure with it. There's no diamonds without pressure. There is, and I've said this, I say this to so many people. I have never met one interesting person in my life that doesn't have some junk in the past.
Yeah.
It just doesn't exist. And, you know, how you grew up, you could say, oh, your life was all rosy. No, there's stuff. There's stuff. It's just you're better at hiding it. Everybody has their own stuff.
Right.
Some are just better at hiding it. So that's the good stuff, and that's what's going to teach you the lesson. I learned more from my losses, and I lost a lot in my life than I have from my victories. I'll watch kids on the field, and the most purest form of any type of help is coaching.
Yeah, yeah.
So you'll watch kids lose, and I'll sit there and I'll watch kids when they lose, and I want to see how they react, because winning's easy. When you're on top of the world,
I love watching people lose and see how they react.
yeah, when you're on top of the world, winning's easy.
You don't learn anything from winning.
Nothing. You learn, you know, you want to be a good winner. Okay, so you don't want to rub it in people's faces. But when people lose, and I watch some kids lose their mind, those are the kids I'll go to. I go, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're telling me you didn't leave it out on the field. You're telling me that you got something left that you didn't show. That's what you're telling me. So next, you got to go do it. So that's the lesson.
And you can imagine what I say when my kids lose and complain. I just say, huh. I mean, my whole family just knows that if they come to me, I always say, save the drama for your mama. You know, when my kids come to me, it's okay to be upset, but I never jump in and try to fix that problem. I just allow them to self-reflect, and they always fix it. They always fix it.
You know, I struggled with this with my kids because I had a very oppressive father who, you know, if I struck out in baseball, I'd get yelled at, stuff like that.
Right.
So when
I wish I had a dad like that.
No, trust me, you do not.
No, I mean, that was there at my games.
With my kids, when they have a bad game,
Right.
here's what I'll do. I'll say, okay, tell me what you did well.
Good question.
Tell me what you did well in the game.
Yeah.
Well, and they'll say this, so it's not a constant, well, you shoulda. And I say, okay, very calmly, I'll say, what did you do wrong? And they'll tell me, and I say, okay, how do we fix it? How do we fix it? Learn from that defeat, because this feeling doesn't feel good. Just like when you were in your dark place, it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Let me see it. Let me find out a way to change it.
I mean, you could also, what my daughter's competing on an international level of jiu-jitsu right now, which means, you know, she just fought in Florida against this girl from Brazil who just beat the shit out of her. And my daughter works.
They live, sleep, and eat.
Well, but my daughter wants to kill this girl next time. But my point is, she was very upset. She was crying and everything like that. So I had that conversation with her after, because she's just traumatized by it. And the question I always say is, I go, what could you do better?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I try to stay away from what did you do wrong, because then I'm teaching them that there is such a thing as wrong. Right. I like to look at in a solution focused way, what could we do better? How could we make it right? And the reason why I think I do that is because that's the way I was raised. I remember how many times I heard no, and, you know, don't do this, and that's wrong, and everything like that. So, you know, I want my kids to grow up in a world where they're not afraid of making mistakes and wrong.
Maybe it's time for me to remove the word wrong, because I think you're absolutely correct on
Think
that one.
about it. It's interesting.